What's up, everyone? We're going to do the top 10 guitar players of my life. It's not the top 10 guitar players of all time, objectively. It's not like the top 10 most influential on any kind of general historical level. This is just the 10 guitar players that have had the greatest impact on my work, my playing, my writing. Some of them are super famous, some of them a little more obscure. I'm going to go through them each, talk about what they mean to me, what I've taken from them as far as like just on the instrument, on a vibe level, and like on technical levels. We'll get a little bit technical. They're not going to be listed in any order of importance or any chronological order. This is just, they're just going to be listed in an order that I thought would be interesting to discuss them in. Up first, we've got Johnny Marr, guitar player of the Smiths, one of the greatest rock or pop bands of all time, obviously. When it comes to the pairing of Morrissey and Johnny Marr, it's really one of those classic, it's an amazing example of that classic dual archetype in rock music of the charismatic frontman singer and the enigmatic sideman guitar player. Axl Rose and Slash, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, David Lee Roth and Eddie. Morrissey and Johnny Marr, it's kind of like the post-punk, kings of that. Morrissey is obviously a huge inspiration for me vocally. Johnny Marr, guitar-wise, he plays that spidery guitar lines they're kind of arpeggios, but then they become lines, and then there's a little bit of strumming as well, and in and out. It's like super busy and separate from the bass too. This is something that I really got from that, where it's like the bass is doing a bunch of stuff like separately from the guitar, which is also very separate from the voice. It's counterpoint. See, that's what I love. Counterpoint. Multiple voices going on at the same time, multiple melody lines interacting. You would think it would be so busy that it would get in the way of the tune of Morrissey's singing, but it just doesn't somehow. His playing is really important to my written stuff, not as much to my improvised stuff, that spidery vibe. You can hear that in my stuff like in Psalm Zero, the song Sparta. And if we're falling back into the old fire. As eccentric and, idiosyncratic as the Smiths were, it still is pop music in the sense that it's beautiful and melodic. It's not like dissonant, atonal. It's not harsh. But, like the jangly, sparkly, kind of spidery guitar lines, they're doing all kinds of they're outlining all kinds of interesting chord progressions. Not so much jazz-ish, but more like the kind of interesting chord progressions that the Beatles were dealing with. Those kind of surprising harmonic moments and cadences. Oh, does he even have any? She said he never really looks at me. It's just so slick. Such style. As for favorite riffs, I would say I got to go with This Charming Man. I mean, it's so classic, but you got to do that one. And also, underrated is You Just Haven't Earned It Yet, Baby. That's a great one, too. I play that a lot when I just randomly pick up a guitar and start noodling. Next up, we've got Dwayne Dennison of the Jesus Lizard. Jesus Lizard were just an unbelievably important band for me in the 90s. They are another example of a really eccentric post-punk band that are very different from the Smiths, very American, the Jesus Lizard. And it's another cool duo. It's not a duo, it's a quartet, but the sort of frontman, sideman, singer, guitar player, charismatic versus enigmatic personalities. You've got a similar kind of thing going with the singer David Yao. Yao is like this completely unhinged, drunken madman, and Dwayne Dennison is like the sort of the thinking man. He's very like sort of introverted. His playing kind of has Johnny Marr-like elements in it too. In that it has that spidery, angular thing of like arpeggios going into single lines. it's always like these separate lines that are separate from the bass, you know? They really have that in common with the Smiths, the Jesus Lizard. He's working with a lot of jazz chords, weird harmony, like stuff that Johnny Marr is not really doing, you know, like more dissonant stuff, like sort of seventh chords. He gives it up to jazz pretty openly. I saw them in high school in 95, at Irving Plaza. I mean, that was the craziest because you'd see David Yao just jumping into the crowd every song, just covered in sweat, just, you know, like all sweaty and gross. And then you got Dwayne Dennison, who's just is like just not overexerting at all. You know, he's just looking at his hands, playing everything with just precision, dynamics, you know. He's like a dynamic player, volume-wise, like sculpting the way he's playing the stuff. You know, it's like just to be that chill on the side. That really was a beautiful thing to see. Favorite riffs? I gotta go with Then Comes Dudley. I'm also going to give it up to that riff, Slave Ship. That is just a brutal song, man. Oof. Number 3, I'm going to mention Derek Bailey. Now, this is a guy who really is a colossal innovator of the instrument. You know, if you're into experimental music just in general, especially improvised music, but just experimental music in general, you know who Derek Bailey is. You know, he revolutionized the instrument the way Cecil Taylor, revolutionized the piano. Derek Bailey represented the British, you know, Euro and British sort of approaches to improvised music, free improvised music that was like inspired by jazz and American, like Black American creative music, but took it in its own kind of Anglo and Euro direction. Sort of takes the blues out of things. And you're dealing with completely atonal, arrhythmic C, but it's not arrhythmic. It's, you know, modernist, fragmented, not grooving, not steady pulse music, you know. These terms get weird. My playing doesn't sound like him, but if you get into him for even a little bit, it changes how you play. It just automatically does. And he kind of opened me up, you know, when I was getting into free improvising and stuff. I remember I had this friend in high school, brilliant guitar player, Alex. I remember he was talking about, he's like, man, when I improvise, sometimes I like to let the guitar play me and just do what physically feels good and not even think about how it sounds. And at the time I was like, you know, I was all like indignant, you know, I was like, that is so unrigorous. How could you not, you know, just let your fingers fly around? But it's like, once I got into Derek Bailey, I'm like, no, you know what? There is this vibe when you're improvising where you can be getting into this physical relationship with the neck and the strings and on your fingers and the touch, you know, that can lead you to play certain stuff that where you're not really hearing in your head what it's going to be. It's not like super deliberate musically, but it's not totally random either. And so you're in this in-between thing where you're kind of just doing shapes and kind of just touching the guitar, you know, in ways that feel right and shapes that feel right. And it's also but it's combining at the same time with like thinking about how it sounds and like intention. And you know, his playing, it's known for being, it's the most atonal thing. It's the most out guitar playing. But you know, when you get into it, there's actually a melodic element in it. It's just fragmented. It's like melodic stuff just fragmented into tiny little shards of glass or something. But these little melodies pop out and stuff. They're actually kind of like beautiful. I'd say the best Derek Bailey thing, certainly no riff to check out. The best record is that I know is Arch Duo, and that's from 1980, and that's him and Evan Parker. You know, you could do an entire video on Evan Parker. Up next, I'm going to mention Justin Broderick, Justin K. Broderick, best known as the man behind Godflesh, also Jesu and a million other side projects as well. Godflesh are so important to the history of metal and extreme music in general and industrial music. And, you know, they bridged industrial and metal in a, you know, this completely unique, earth-shattering way. They changed my life when I got into them when I was young. They're known for being like the darkest, most fucking brutally heavy, negative, crushing, like Swans, but for the metal world. There's a lot of elegance, though, to Broderick's playing, which is really not brutality. There is an elegance and a sensitivity to the way he plays and what the actual riffs are. The ice-cold beauty and ice-cold ugliness of Godflesh, so much of that comes from what he's doing as far as just the harmonies that he's using in these riffs. It's like super dissonant, evil stuff, but very like considered and careful. And there'll be like these major intervals too, and major harmonic cadences that make it even more like compelling, because it's not just like evil, evil, evil. There's like this sadness and like weird moments of like optimism. He's always doing stuff with like letting open strings ring out, which you don't hear a lot in metal, because his music is very slow. So there's this room for like notes to ring out, like these sour bells, and just cool like bending, like he doesn't just play like it's cold, but he plays with attitude. There's like bending and sort of like sliding. It has style. He owes so much to Swans, not just as the sort of the slowness and the brutality of the music and the imagery and stuff, but he owes quite a bit to Norman Westberg, the guitar player from Swans. Broderick's playing actually probably has influenced my improvising as much, if not more, than improvised my riff writing or part writing. Favorite riffs, there's so many I could pick from. I'm going to go with some lesser known ones. I'm going to say Body Dome Light off of Selfless record. And also Monotremata. Such an ugly, just cold-blooded song and album. That's from the record Pure. Number 5, very different than Broderick, is Bill Frisell. He was really important to me because I found out about him along with all of the other sort of quote-unquote downtown musicians like John Zorn and Elliott Sharp and these composers and improvisers. And Frisell was in Naked City, which is how I found out about all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, he's coming out of jazz, and I got into him when I was into jazz, but then it's like he was one of these guys who's like, oh, jazz, but it's experimental. The fact that he was bridging these styles, like playing in a jazz context, but bringing in rock elements, and he had effects, he's using like noise elements and stuff. It was just mind-blowing to me to be like, oh, you can just be between worlds. You can span worlds. You can have your foot in a bunch of different things. I mean, just that basic identity thing as a musician, that opened me up to just be like, I don't have to live in a genre box, I can roam. As a guy who plays jazz, which I was at the time, hearing a guy play jazz tunes, like even traditional tunes, but to play them in a way where you're like not trying to play saxophone stuff or trumpet stuff or even piano stuff. It's like he plays the guitar like a guitar. Again, like Broderick, he lets like open strings ring out. He's also big for me just on the minimalism level, because it's just like jazz players are always just trying to play a million notes, just like not even taking a breath to breathe. You know, at least horn players have to breathe at some point, unless you're doing circular breathing. His use of space and his sense of humor with the music, the sort of quirkiness, that I don't really have. I mean, in real life I have it, but yeah, guitar playing wise, I don't fuck with humor, you know. But he has a great sort of like that really comes from like Thelonious Monk. You know, there's so much Monk in his playing. It's like tons of space, minimalism, quirky, weird humor. I saw him play solo years ago, and he just played mostly jazz standards, but like on his electric, you know, and with effects and loop pedals and stuff. And he would play the minimalism where he would be playing like the melody and then just like one note, one other note. Counterpoint stuff with like two notes at the same time, two voices, rarely playing a big old full chord, giving you this skeleton of the harmony, the skeleton of what the song is. Zero attempt to blow you away with technique. To know your way around the guitar that well that you can just like freely roam around and play these beautiful melodies or like dyads, like just a couple, just like skeletal stuff, but just lyrically make the most beautiful lyrical interpretations of jazz standards. I mean, it's just like mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. My favorite Frizzell record is just called Live, and it's from 1995, and it's a trio. It's just him, Kermit Driscoll on electric bass, and Joey Barron on drums. And, you know, they're just like made to play together. You know, it's just like psychic communication, you know. And they play original tunes of his and a couple of standards. And best track is a medley of Frizzell's original called Crumb, and then it's a medley that goes from that into the Sonny Rollins tune No Mo. Staying on the jazz train, I'm going to mention Wes Montgomery. Now, this is an artist who, I mean, you won't hear any Wes Montgomery in anything I'm doing anymore, you know? And I'm not even going to really spend too long on him, but I mean, he's just like super important to me just getting into jazz in the first place. If anyone here is like wants to start playing jazz guitar, Wes Montgomery is a great place to start because it's like, it has the bebop modern jazz kind of language going, but it's also still has a lot of bluesy stuff that, like, you know, if you're like a rock player or a blues player, it's an easy sort of transition. My favorite Wes Montgomery track and solo is definitely Yesterdays. I learned that solo note for note when I was studying jazz as a kid, and it's great. Not impossible to play, just really, really lyrical, just really memorable lines, like nothing flashy. It's just music, you know? Apparently, at some point in the 60s, John Coltrane was talking about bringing Wes Montgomery into his quartet with Jimmy Garrison and Elvin Jones and McCoy Tyner. That is bizarre to me. It's very hard for me to imagine that working. But what do I know? I'm sure Train knew what he was doing. I mean, it's just such a funny, like, Wes is so smooth, you know? Dave Mustaine, the man behind Megadeth, one of the greatest metal bands of all time. Probably the most important one for me coming up, you know, I mean, I sort of got into Megadeth, Metallica, and Slayer all at the same time. But really, Megadeth was the one for me. They're not the most evil. Slayer's definitely the most evil. Metallica maybe is the most heroic. But Megadeth had this weird mix of, like, elegant riffs. There's an elegance to them, but then also a punk nastiness to the overall vibe of the music. Maybe his lyrics or vocals as well. Harmony-wise, he's doing stuff that, like, Kirk Hammett and James Hetfield were not doing. There's evil, but there's those colorful choices. I think my favorite Megadeth track solos and riffs and everything, it's got to be Holy Wars. I know there's more obscure tracks I could mention, Tornado of Souls also, but man, it's Holy Wars. The sick thing about that is the solos, like the first solo that Marty Friedman takes is like over this this sort of colorful chord progression, and he's playing all this like tasteful, like very schooled, like Berkeley Berkeley School of Music style stuff. And then later on Mustaine's solo, he just like goes totally the other direction with some way more just like fierce, simplistic, just like repetitive patterns just going all the way up the neck and then just squealing at the end of it. A lot of the time his playing is a lot more nuanced and sort of tricky and thoughtful, like I said. Often his playing is like that, but I love in that song how like he lets Marty Friedman do the tasteful, slick guy stuff, and then he like provides the foil of just this like just straight, almost punk, just the thrash side of it. Going on with pioneers of heavy music, Trey Azagthoth from Morbid Angel. This was sort of the next level of checking out heavy music for me after getting into Megadeth and Slayer. It's like, all right, what's the next thing? It's a certain type of personality, right? You're like, what's the next heaviest? What's the even more brutal music? What's the even more violent horror movie? What's the next disgusting porn? What's the hard drug? At what point? Anyway, Morbid Angel, hearing them was amazing for me. It was the first time I heard death growl vocals. And see, guitar-wise, this was important to me because even though I never went into death metal, this was the first time I heard like atonal guitar playing. And actually, when I'm talking about atonal, I'm really talking about the solos. The riffs are not so much atonal, they're more like, but they're highly chromatic. His solos are just really a unique thing of beauty in metal because they're totally atonal. He improvises all of his solos, which, I mean, it's not completely unique, but it's most guys in extreme metal write their solos, as far as I know. It's just the most unhinged, like, free jazz type playing. I mean, a Trey Azagthoth solo is like, it's like an Anthony Braxton saxophone solo or a Cecil Taylor piano solo. I mean, it's on that level of like Derek Bailey or something. But it's death metal. Favorite solo, favorite riffs, favorite track. I guess I'll go with Rapture off of the Covenant record. His use of the whammy bar is so... There's a uniqueness to it because it's like he's not just doing dive bombs at like some, really big dramatic moment at the end or at the beginning or like to finish a phrase. Like he's got crazy, like extreme whammy bar stuff happening in the middle of phrases and then like holding it in some weird place and doing this like really controlled whammy bar stuff that's like, it's totally atonal and out, but it's like, there's that melodic, like, careful shaping of stuff when he goes into tapping, little moments of tapping amidst all the fast picking. That stuff is just super slick. It has that, it's like Eddie Van Halen levels of nuanced little tapping moments. A lot of the things that I love about Trey Azagthoth's soloing are also things that I love about Vernon Reid's soloing. So honorable mention, Morbid Angel really hold up to me. I've been listening to them so much lately. They really hold up to me as scary music because, it's, I love that music can still feel a little bit scary without it having to do with the guys themselves. Black metal band, like, oh, they're scary because they're Nazis. The guy's scary because they're pedophiles or whatever. But that's not the music. That's the mystique, the mythos, the narrative. But I love Morbid Angel. There's no mystique. I mean, they're just death metal guys. That's it. But the music still is kind of scary to me, actually. Just, it's like watching a horror movie with a monster. You know the monster's a puppet or a CGI, but it's just a scary looking puppet, man. It's like a scary looking CGI Cthulhu monster coming at you. You know, Morbid Angels still are that. Not sure if you've heard of this guy named Jimi Hendrix, but he played a little guitar in the 60s. You know, some people like him. To put him on this list, it's almost silly. It's almost like, you know, saying that air had an influence on me having oxygen in my blood. I will say, though, that, you know, I didn't really get into him until a little bit later, like 18, 19, when I already was a serious guitar player. I guess what it really did for me was just realize that, you know, I'm not really into guitar playing. I'm into music, you know, because Jimi Hendrix, it's music. You don't have to know anything about guitar or be a guitar player to feel the spirit of what that music is. I'm not even going to say my favorite Jimi Hendrix riff or song. I'm going to say my favorite Jimi Hendrix moment is at the end of the second chorus of Foxy Lady, when he's going like out of that into like the solo, and he just is like, Foxy Lady is like, that's fucking amazing. Like, it's just like 3 notes, but the way he plays it, it's just this attitude moment that sort of, to me, sums up everything that's great about him. All right, we're here at number 10, and the last one on the list here is Trey Spruance, the guitar player from Mr. Bungle. And he was super influential to me, not on the level of having an individual style. His unique creative voice is as a composer. As a guitar player, he's just an amazing guitar player whose playing serves that vision, but like the playing itself is not like, ooh, I can tell it's Trey Spruance. You know what I mean? He's like inspiring to me in a different kind of way. He's more like a composer who is a master guitar player and not a master like stylist on the instrument, you know? It took me like a while to even start to care how great a guitar player he is. They're always like jumping styles, you know, Mr. Bungle. I mean, if you know the music, you know, it's going from like death metal to jazz to circus music to surf rock to Arabian techno. Spruance is always just nailing every style immaculately. It became inspiring to me just the idea of learning how to play in all of these different styles, but kind of like not making a big deal of yourself as a virtuoso. For my favorite Mr. Bungle track that Spruance wrote and that like features his guitar playing in a particular way is the track Mamishka Mouse Squaws on the Disco Volante record. There's this little brief solo that he takes in that where he's just going up in this crazy diminished stuff. It's kind of like Raymond Scott, if you know him. That's sort of like cartoon psycho jazz vibes. Plays it so amazingly and with style, with just great rhythm and time and flow and feeling. That was a moment when I really got into that. I was like, oh, okay. Like, this guy's not just a master composer. He's a master guitar player. And I haven't even been noticing what a master guitar player he was this whole time. And now it's like, oh, right. He's just this entire time I've been in the hands of a master. Okay, there they are. Those are my people. Those are my guitar daddies. You know, they're like members of my family. These are like my fathers and uncles. You know, they made me who I am. They made me the man that I am today, for better or worse. Any young guitar players checking this out, getting into new stuff, check out every single one of these players that I mentioned, and check out the examples that I mentioned. Best thing you can do if you're a young player is to just transcribe stuff by ear, learn stuff by ear. And you know, there's tabs all over the place online. There's tutorials all over the place online. It's a beautiful thing, but try doing it just by ear. You know, I did that Wes Montgomery solo completely by ear. That like carves pathways in your brain, you know? That's like neurological workout. That crazy Trey Spruance solo I learned by ear. Anyway, there it is. Thank you for watching. There'll be some more top 10 lists, I think, in the future. Bringing that back a little bit. All right. See you next time.